And I'm going to try and take us through some snapshots. And the reason I'm taking you through snapshots is because I got more content than we can cover. And I don't want to overwhelm you. And so I'm going to, if you see me skip slides, don't worry about it. I'm not done when I finish teaching here today. Just so you know, it is my intention, after discussing it with my wife, to maybe every 3 months or so, do something like this, maybe on a smaller scale, where we can comfortably go through some of these concepts and this idea of reading the Bible as a story. What we've been doing is an overview, really. And I would like, for example, maybe 3 months from now, maybe in October, to spend the entire time just going through Genesis 1. And take 3 months after that, what's that, maybe February or January next year, come back and spend a whole day going through Genesis 2. And then 3 months after that, what's that, April? Come back and spend another 3 months going through Genesis 3. All right? And then we just take our time to really go through it. And part of what I would like to do is to do a survey to figure out whether we feel like 2 half days is better than 1 full day. So for instance, one Saturday from 9 to 1, and then we go home, rest the brain, and we'll come back the following Saturday, and we'll do another 9 to 1. Or if some of us may prefer, that we go the whole day, yeah. I know there are different views. So I'm going to find a way. I don't know if, did Lovette ask for email addresses when you registered? No, she didn't. What we'll do at the end, if you're interested in participating in that survey, I will find a piece of paper, someone just remind me, and whoever is interested, as you leave, you can just put your email address on it. And I'll use that as the survey group to figure out what people are really interested in. So if I blitz past slides, don't feel like me pay me $500 and them not give me that. That's not. Or don't think he's holding out on me. At this point, I want to be sensitive to not overwhelming you. And we do have a little crush of time. So I'm going to be selective, but I'm going to try to paint the picture. And I want to allow at least 15 minutes Q&A after what we do now and this afternoon. All right? But fear not, unless God causes me to forget all that I would like to teach. At some point in the future, it is my intention to, at a slower pace, to walk us through it where we can really digest it. I don't want to choke anybody. All right? Everybody with me? Yeah, you're going to say something, Ozzy? You have to speak up. Yes. Yes.
You have to adjust that Noah thing, you know.
The Noah thing. Yes. Noah is in the slides. Okay. All right. We ready? Ready, set, go. Hold on to your seat. Let's make sure we don't choke on everybody, keep lunch down. All right. So I started by saying that Genesis 1 to 11 is the introduction to the Hebrew Bible. You got to get the beginning. We did 1 to 3. The story is that God desires to dwell with and bless humanity. But mankind rebels, and because of our rebellion, we're separated from God and God's blessings. This happened in Eden, and it happens in our lives as well. You know what that is like. I don't have to ask. The Bible says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And I know all of you, and I love all of you, and know that this has happened in all of your lives. But then God wants to redeem mankind and restore what is lost. That's where the story ends in Revelation. But we're on this trajectory. Now, when we started, we said that there's a plot that a story has. There's a beginning, it gets the story going, and then there's conflict. This is the Garden of Eden. And in the middle of the story, there's escalation. Okay? And this is what we're going to be reading about beginning from Genesis 4 to 11. And it continues all the way through the Old Testament into the New Testament. It climaxes at Jesus' death on the cross. All right? And then the story of the church, Acts, the New Testament epistles, is a resolution of how the climax works out all of the problems that were created by the conflict. Following? And then we get to Revelation, that's the end, where everything is resolved. So the entire biblical story, it has one storyline, but it consists of multiple overlapping plot lines and plots within plots and various subplots, but they all come together to make one story. And we could trace various Jamaican threads in the story. Okay? This is one thread we could trace, which is the idea of God seeking to restore this dwelling that he had with man in the Garden of Eden. And if you were at the Kingston Church service sometime in September last year, many of you will recall, I walked through that. That's one thread of the story. But there are other threads, and one important thread is the idea of who is the seed to come. There's a suspense as to who is the coming seed of the woman who's going to defeat the serpent and deal with evil at its source. Remember that the Bible is like a quilt. The various stories are bound together by common threads. These threads are repeated patterns, words, motifs. And to see the overarching story, we have to understand how to connect the stories through the threads. So this is on the handout. And this is an overview of Genesis 1 to 12. And I just want to throw you through this. I'm adapting this from Tim Mackey, the Bible Project guy. There are some references on the handout to a series called The Classroom at BibleProject.com. The website is there. You could explore this at some greater length there. But here's how this whole first section of the Bible hangs together. God creates the cosmos. He blesses man, tells him to be fruitful and multiply. And then he creates this mountain garden temple. And what happens there is man sins, discovers nakedness, they're cursed, and they're exiled. That's Adam and Eve's failure. Well, what happens next is Cain and Abel, next generation divide, and they make things worse because the thing has spread now within the family. One brother kills the next. And Cain, who was the firstborn, he gets rejected because of his sin. He really is a seed of the snake. Okay? He's an offspring of the snake because he's doing what he thinks is right in his eyes. God tell him, hey, watch that sin thing, He said, forget that. I can kill my brother and deal with it. And he gets cursed and he gets exiled. And then we have these genealogies. First, from Adam to Lamech, and that is the bloodline of the seed of the snake. And by the time we get to Lamech, things bad. He says, a boy deal with me away, me just kill him 7 times. Right? This is violence off the chart, and it shows the trajectory of sin. It corrupts. You know what corruption means? It rots. It rots. But then we have the genealogy of the seed of the woman, Adam to Noah, and so there's hope. But what happens is we have these sons of God who invade the earth. Sons of God are from heaven, and they come down, and this is a cosmic rebellion because they are transgressing the boundary between heaven and earth. And God says, you know what? Things got completely out of hand. I'm going to flood it. And so Noah comes on. And God in Noah creates a new humanity. And he starts over. See, this is parallel to up here at the beginning. God says, he blesses them, tells them to be fruitful and multiply. And so we have recreation. But Noah goes in a garden where he has some fruit. And he sins, involved in some nakedness. All these repeated motifs are connecting this to what happens in Eden. You tracking with me? Yeah. And so sin re-enters the picture. And then the next generation, his son, because of Ham, they divide. The firstborn Ham is rejected. He's cursed. God scatters. And then we have some genealogies. The genealogy of the non-chosen, including a guy named Nimrod, whose name means rebellion. In other words, things are like Lamech get into a really bad place. And then what we have next is that the sons of Adam invade heaven at Babel. This is another cosmic rebellion, but it's going in the next direction. And then we have the genealogy of the chosen. These are the seed of the woman. And what God does is he starts over with Abraham, who's a new humanity, who he blesses, tells, be fruitful and multiply. This is a recreation and a blessing. Are you following me? You see what I mean by repeated patterns and how they connect? That's what we have going on. So Genesis 1 to 11, a big part of what it's telling us is that there's a connection between divine presence and order. So when people are in God's presence, they have order. But because man chooses to make himself the center of order, I get to choose what is good and what is evil, forget God, he gets put out of the garden and chaos ensues. Now, what happens after that? Man keeps trying to recreate order, but in their own way. And so Cain going into a place where he builds a city, he's trying to recreate order by human terms. But what happens in cities? And we all get together as human beings. Sin goes off the charts. There's violence is what happens. Cities are very violent places. Think about Kingston. Think about Jamaica, any city. It's, what they're doing is they're trying to recreate order their own way, and it's creating more chaos. And so this is the idea of them calling on God. This is the idea of human civilizations that we're told about. All of these are human ways of trying to create order, including trying to build a tower where they're trying to bring God down on their terms. That just is more chaos. And so what happens is God creates at the beginning, and because we mess up, there has to be uncreation. That's the flood. And God does a recreation with Noah. I'm going to try and show you that in a second. But what happens with that recreation with Noah? Noah blows it, and things progress again to the point that God has to wipe out and start over. And so he starts over again with Abraham. So with Cain and Abel, we find that they're in Eden, and they're seeking God's favor. They're trying to get back the presence of God, and they're making this offering at the door. So they're in Eden, by the way. They're outside of the garden, but they're still in Eden. So they're at the door trying to get in, offering. And one of them, something wrong with his offering. And God tells him to do the right thing. He said, no, I'll take things in my hand, I can kill my brother. Seeks his own way and rejects God's way by killing his brother. Well, we've seen this before, right? Sin, what happens? Curse, exile. Remember Adam and Eve? Sin, leave the garden. God says to Cain, leave Eden. It's getting worse. But God graciously protects him. That's what he does with Adam and Eve. He says, here's what may happen to you, but let me put some clothes on you. God says to Cain, you have to leave. He said, well, people get kill me. God said, put a mark on you and nobody get mess with you. Has God ever in your sin been gracious to you? Yeah. This is a pattern that we all have lived. So Cain goes away from the presence of the Lord and he settles east of Eden. At the break, a lady asked me, what's the point of east? East seems to be the direction away from God. Cain builds his own human-centered ordering, and his descendants originate civilization. They're still trying to order. And Lamech, man, he's seven, the complete, he's the worst end of the violence. It gets bad. So Eve has a child named Seth. This is the next line. And Seth's line is compared to Lamech's, in the genealogy of Cain, because in Seth's line we have people like Enoch, who does not die and who walks with God. So there is some hope. Then we get down to Noah. And what's happening here, they're hoping that he is going to be the seed who is to come. They say when Lamech had lived 182 years, he's a different Lamech. He fathered a son and called his name Noah. Noah is from that same word, nuach, rest, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Their hope is that Noah is going to reverse the curse. You with me? So what happens is they begin to spread, and they have more children. And God, the sons of God, saw that the daughters of men were attractive. Now, saw attractive. Does that remind you of Eden? Yeah. And they took, are you guys with me? Eve, as wives, any they chose. They're doing their own thing. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide. And he continues, and then we have these Nephilim, who could either be offspring of the sons of God and women, or they could be around on their own. But what happens is, because of this scene, things just get worse. And I don't have time to tell you about Jude, where they clearly are thinking that the Nephilim and the sons of God are angels who come down and have offspring with women. We'll talk about that when we get together next time. If you have a question about it, you can ask me at the break. Somebody said, no. I'm sorry. Okay. So, and this is a little bit of a detour, given my current trajectory. There are three views on the sons of God. They could either be earthly kings. They could either be angels who were with women. And let me go back to my notes. Or they could be sons of Seth. I think that what they really are angels who mate with women, because in Jude, this is and Peter has this as well. He talks of angels who do not keep their own domain, the heavenly realm, abandon their proper dwelling place. God has locked them up, basically. And then it says, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as these angels, indulged in sexual perversion and went after strange flesh. So it's comparing what these angels did with the Sodom and Gomorrah, where there's a boundary crossing. That's homosexuality, this idea of strange flesh. And the idea is that Jude is reading this, the sons of God, as angels who cross the boundary and have relations with women. Okay. So, what we have with the sons of God is a cosmic rebellion. Now notice that in Genesis 1, God saw that it was good. Okay? He's God. But we find in Genesis 3 that the woman saw that the tree that God told her not to eat from, that is good. She's seen it in her own way, right? And it's attractive to the eye, and she takes some of it and eats. Well, in Genesis 6:2, the sons of God see that the daughters of men are attractive, and they take as wives any they choose. There's a pattern here. And what's happening is that both with the woman and with the sons of God, they are reversing God's role. They are the ones who see what is good. You ever done that? All of you have. So this is a heavenly rebellion leading to illicit union with human woman. And as I said, the Nephilim, which means fallen ones, shows that as a result of, or at this time, things get so bad that you know what God has got to do? He's got to wipe out the earth. So if we look at the progression, we see how the corruption works. God sees how it is good, what he's created. He wants him to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. But the woman sees what is good in her eyes, and she takes it. And then mankind begins to multiply like God wants. But because there's sin, guess what happens? It's not a good situation. It becomes a bad, because we have the sons of God who see, and they're taking wives they choose. But what happens is that multiplies the wickedness of the human race on the earth. So instead of multiplying good, because they're going opposite the way God wants, it's multiplying evil. And so we get to Genesis 6, and we read that now the earth was corrupt in God's sight. Corrupt means it's rotten. And the earth was filled with violence. So God wanted to fill the earth with goodness. What we have instead is violence. And what God sees now is not that it's good because of what man has done. He sees corruption because all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. So what happens in Genesis 6 is God says, I'm sorry for creating man, and I'm going to hit the reset button. But in his grace, he decides to spare Noah. And what happens is, and you got to notice this, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. And the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So there is something holding back the fountains of the great deep, so we only get good water come up, not chaotic waters. And we have some windows that are closed that prevent all the water from coming down. And what God does, he bursts open the thing below and fly the gate above. What is this that is happening right here? Chaos. It's coming back. God was holding the chaos at bay by his firmament and what he did down here. And he is reversing his creation, his decreation. It's imploding. The cosmos is collapsing on itself because God is wiping it out. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock were with him, and God made a wind blow over the earth. Someone had asked me, what's the significance of the Spirit of God hovering over the waters? Remember that? And I said that word spirit is ruach, which means wind, and it also means breath. And so what we have here is after his act of decreation, God is recreating, just like he did in Genesis 1. And the waters subside. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heaven were closed. God is separating again. You guys seeing it? Yeah. And the rain from the heavens were restrained, and the waters receded. And then what happens after the waters abate, then the ark comes to rest on the mountains, which means the land has appeared again. God has recreated. Now, one thing I think this says about God is he is a persistent God. If it were me, I'd have given up on us a long time. But the nature of God is that he perseveres with us. That's what the story is telling us. And I don't have time to go through, this is on the handout, but again, this is from the Bible Project. There are clear correlations between what happens in Genesis 1 and what happens in Genesis 8 to 9. So we have the ruach over the land and the waters receding. We have the separation of the waters above and the waters below. We have that here in Genesis 8 to 9. God gathers the waters into place and the dry land appears. What we have is the waters return from the land, the tops of the mountains appear, and the dove comes back with a fresh olive branch. The land has appeared. We have the sun and the moon appointed to rule the boundaries. The dove returns at the time of evening. And we could go on. You can have a look at that. But here's the thing that is different on day 7, where God rested and God blessed. We have the ark rested. So God does not rest. Because what man has done has prevented him from having a place like Eden where he can dwell with us, even though he does bless. Well, we know what happens. God blesses Noah. He says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. And this language is the same language in Genesis chapter 1. God is starting over with Noah. The only difference is he does not say to rule and subdue the earth, but rather he's giving man instructions about he gives them the animals to eat before it was plant life, because man has become more violent. And he gives instructions about man not killing man because things have degenerated, rather than sending them to subdue the earth and to bring non-order to order, he's got to be telling them, don't kill each other. We'll get to Noah. So what happens is God recreates an ordered world. He puts Noah and his family in it. He begins on a mountain. And during the break, Dario asked me, is the point of these mountains that these are places where we get to meet with God? And he referenced Sinai, and he referenced Jesus going up on the mountain. Remember I told you that mountains are like temples. These are places where we get to encounter God. So it's like God starting out again on Eden, which was on a mountain. He blesses them, tells them to be fruitful, multiply, and Noah sacrifices on a mountaintop. It's going good. Noah looks like maybe he can be the seed. But we know what happens, right? The guy is in a garden. He drinks of the fruit of his vineyard. He gets drunk. He lays naked. Nakedness is a feature of Eden. His son sees his father's nakedness. This is some kind of grievous sexual offense that divides him from his brothers, like Cain and Abel, so that the next generation is going down the path of Cain and Abel. Noah awakes and knows what his son had done, like even Adam knew that they were naked. God curses Ham, like man and woman were cursed in the garden, and Cain was cursed. From Noah comes all the nations of the world, which basically was the then known world. And what happens is, from Noah, who came out of the ark, were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and these were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the whole earth. So in their perception, all the nations of their world came from Noah. And so it's on that basis that we say that when Paul says in Acts, forget the chapter and the verse, so I think it's Acts 17, when Paul says from one nation, from one man, God made all the nations of the earth and he gave them the places where they should live and so on, he's referencing this. He's not talking about Adam. Now, you think, no man, I used to think it's Adam, me too. But that's okay. We're not dead yet, we can still learn. I'll pause there. You had a question, Keon? Yes. It is. But I think the question was asked because the question is, does Noah's lineage trace back to Adam? It does. But the question was asked because earlier we considered the possibility that Adam and Eve were put in the garden and there may have been other people other than them whom God had created at the time. And if that was the case, someone asked before the break, well, wouldn't that mean that some of us could have descended from people other than Adam and Eve? And my answer to that question was, well, that would be possible, save that it is clear from this passage in Genesis that God wipes out everything and then all nations descend from Noah. Yeah. Who was from Adam, yes. But there could have been some other people who descended from Adam which are not in Noah's lineage. But we don't have to believe that. That is, so listen, there's a lot we don't know. And I'm not suggesting that if you want to say, no man, all of us come from Adam, that's okay. I'm giving you some different things to think about. But that was the point with Noah. Ozzy, you had a question on that?
Slide.
You want to do what?
Slide.
This one? Yeah.
So
I'm listening. I'm just getting my water.
so the thing, so I did a little
Yes.
thing.
Research.
Yeah.
Good.
So in Romans, it talks about from one man all condemnation.
Romans.
Yeah.
Yes. Because from one man sin entered into the
What passage
world.
are you looking at?
Romans 5,
Okay.
verse 12 to 21. So,
Yep.
so it's saying from Adam all sin entered.
Yes.
And it says from one man, Jesus, we got redemption.
Yes.
So that scripture is different than Acts 17. So we should not put the two of them in the same context then. Because Acts 17 is talking about
Acts 17 is talking about the origin of all men and nations. And Romans 5 is talking about Adam as the source of sin for all of us. So there are two different things they're talking about. And Romans 5 is a very difficult passage, but I think the idea in Romans 5 is that Adam is, like I was saying earlier, representative of all of us. I don't think Paul is trying to say there that all of us descend from Adam. He's saying that Adam sinned, and because Adam sinned, in a sense, because he was representative of all of us, we all sinned. So you don't have to descend from a representative. If you elect a president, and he represents you, and he decides, you know what, we are going to print money and give to everybody. Because he's your representative and the choice he makes, it affects you when inflation spirals out of control. So that, I think, is a sense in which Adam represents all of us. But Paul is not in Romans 5 saying that all men descend from Adam, because he does not really say that. Yeah? So, but that's fine. But understand what I'm saying. You don't have to accept that there were people outside of Adam who were on the earth when he was created. That's one theory. Okay? I think it makes better sense of Genesis. I think it makes better sense of the kind of jarring disconnect between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. But all it is a theory. It's not, you don't have to believe that to go to heaven. And I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping that we can all mature to realize. There are certain things that are central to our faith we have to agree on. Jesus is Lord. What sin is. God is love. We must repent and be baptized in order for us to be saved. That's at the core of what we believe. But then there are some other things which are important, but they're not core. And we can have disagreement on. And then there are some other things. How many wise men were there that, hey, go to town? And so I think we have to give ourselves the freedom to, for us to really grapple with the Bible as we mature as Christians and as we get older. I think we've got to be okay with some level of disagreement on things that are matters of personal opinion. Yeah? Okay? All right. I don't want to get stuck on Noah, but I'll take two more. Yes, go ahead.
Next generation saw his father's nakedness,
Yes.
some kind of grievous.
Yes.
Are we saying that he committed some kind of grievous sexual offense?
Something happened there. That's a rabbit hole. The idea of uncovering his father's nakedness is used elsewhere in the Bible to refer to prohibited types of sexual relations, like, for example, with your aunt or with your mother. I left it like that. When we come back in October, we can, yeah. So, but yes, it could either be that he just saw his father naked, but there's more there. Why is his son cursed and not him? And then there's this concept in the Bible of if you sleep with your father's wife, then you are gaining certain rights in terms of inheritance. That's what happened. It doesn't say that?
It doesn't say that, anything about.
It simply says that he uncovered his father's nakedness, which is a term which refers elsewhere to why you must not sleep with your father's wife. That is your father's nakedness. Don't uncover your father's nakedness.
Okay. So it could mean that it could mean.
It could, but again, I'm not telling you have to believe that. I'm saying there's more going on there. I was leaving it here, but you asked a good question. But whatever it is, it's a grievous sexual offense. Either he was looking at his dad while he was naked. Some people say he could have done something with his dad. Or it could be his mom. It could be just lust, looking at his dad while he was naked. It could be lust, or it could just be some kind of disrespectful behavior. But there's something going on. My point is, he's taking the sin to the next level. So his father blows it, but like Cain, he does something against his family, which is like next level. And we're following this trajectory where it gets out of control and God has got to wipe things out. I'll take one more. I saw your hand at the back, Mr. Price Jr. Junior but major. You have to speak up so we can hear.
All right, I think I lost my trend of thought, but I just want to get it into perspective.
Yeah.
So we started in the beginning saying that people may have existed alongside Adam and Eve in the garden.
Yes.
So, of course, the lineages in terms of everybody coming from Adam, in terms of the men, Noah and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But Noah's wife, just a question,
Yeah.
would necessarily be from that lineage or probably out.
Well, lineage in the Bible, in a Hebrew society, is going to be traced through the man. And that's why you have women in Jesus' genealogy, but it's a male genealogy. And so even though she comes from outside, Noah is the one whose the lineage is traced through. Yeah? Make sense? Yes. Yes, that's correct. That's one of the reasons why people think that he had done something. You look at the text, it could connote that. But again, I don't think we need to nail it down. The pattern is what is important. Noah blows it, next generation blows it more, it escalates until guess what? God says, reset button, and that's why he scatters them at Babel. Yeah? Okay? Keeping going. So basically, God scatters them, and this scattering really takes place after Babel, even though it comes before Babel, Genesis 9 before Genesis 10, because we're told these are the families of the sons of Noah according to their descendants by their nations, and out of these the nations were separated on the earth after the flood. God scatters them because at Babel, what happens is they come together. They're all speaking the same language because they all come down through Noah. And they go towards Babylon, east. They're going away from God. And they say, let's build ourselves a city. They're organizing human ordering again. And they want to build a tower whose top will reach into heaven. They're trying to bring God down. And let's make a name for ourselves. So kind of like Eve, I want to be God too. And otherwise we will be scattered, which God said, go fill the earth, but they're doing their own thing. And it's thought that this tower is a ziggurat, which was really like basically they would build these sacred mountains in Babylon, and the idea was it created a space where the gods could come down and descend to men. So they're trying to bring God down by their own effort. And God comes down. They say going up into the heaven, But God has to come down to see it. And God says, if as one people speak in the same language have begun to do this, and nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them, come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. What does that remind you of? Pentecost. We're going to come there. But does it remind you of anything early in Genesis? Of God saying, they're blowing it. If we allow them to continue on this track, it's not going to be good. Eden. It's the same pattern. Is this making sense? All right. So what does God do? He scatters them. He stops their city. And he confuses their language. And he spreads them over the face of the earth. So we have cosmic rebellion too. This is the Tower of Babel. They're trying to restore order by building a city. And we're establishing access to God's presence by building a tower that goes into the heavens in order to bring God down. And so their efforts are centered on themselves, just like Eve wanted to become like God. They're trying to build a tower that reaches into heaven, and they're trying to make a name for themselves. God comes down, he sees their efforts, and just like at Eden where he says, behold, the man has become like one of us, similar language, behold, now let us go down. God scatters them. So God comes, he says, behold, now he says, let us do X, and he imposes the penalty. And they journey east, just like God had drove them out of Eden and put a cherubim to the east of the garden. Now, one of the things I think that we don't clearly see is that in Deuteronomy 32, 8 to 9, when God banishes them, scatters them, what is happening is he's starting over with Abraham, which happens in Genesis 12. Deuteronomy 32 helps us understand this because it says, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, but the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So the idea is that God, basically at Babel, he allots the other nations to the sons of God, but he takes Israel through Abraham as his own. He plans to come back and redeem everyone, but he's starting over with Abraham alone. Making sense? All right. Okay. So one of the things that is implied in Genesis 12, remember the pattern I've shown you? There's this creation. Adam and Eve sin. Cain makes it worse. We go down his generation, Lamech is off the charts. Then we have this cosmic rebellion. Rebellion gone all across heaven and earth because of the sons of God come down and they, have children with women. And God says, things too bad. Reset button, flood. And the flood really is a decreation and a recreation. All right? And so God starts over with Noah. And Noah sins. And his son sins even worse than him. And then his line of a man named Nimrod, which is like Lamech, which is off the charts. And then we have another cosmic rebellion because what happens now is man is trying to breach heaven by building this big tower. And God comes down and he says, I promise Noah not going to flood them. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to scatter them and confuse their language. And then in Genesis 12, after that, what happens? God calls Abraham. And he blesses him. And he tells him, go, be fruitful and multiply. He's starting over with Abraham. And all I'm suggesting is that Deuteronomy 32 gives us a little bit more insight into the fact that God is starting over with Abraham. Because it is telling us that what God does is that God selects out of all the nations. It's like God allots the nations to the sons of God, but Abraham he chooses as his own. Because he's starting over with Abraham. He doesn't wipe them out with a flood, but he creates a distinction between them. And this is where we get the idea of the Gentiles. The Gentiles refer to the nations. And so the Gentiles are a completely different people than Israel because God is doing something special with Israel that he wants eventually to use to get back the nations. So the nations are scattered, the nations are over here, but I'm going to start over with Abraham, and I'm going to build a nation through which I hope to save these that I've got to put to the side. Does that make sense now? All right.